So what are we here to talk about? Azure Data Studio, the new frontier. If this isn't the session that you're wanting to learn about, then you do have time to leave. I won't be offended. Can you please shut the door, Chris? Okay, for those of you who don't know me, my name's Warwick. I'm a data platform MVP, principal consultant with SQL Masters Consulting based in Brisbane, Australia. The most important parts up on this slide, my contact details. Feel free to reach out to me at any point in time to ask me questions about this session or any other session, and I'll be happy to talk to you and answer your questions. The next couple of slides, most of you will have seen these before, so we won't spend too much time on them. If you haven't already, please silence your phones, or we can all have a group conversation with whoever is on the phone. Explore Pass. There's lots to learn. You're here to learn. The biggest thing that I can give you to take away from this conference, who's a first timer? Okay, so the biggest thing I can give you to take away from this conference is not what you're going to learn from me today. It's actually meeting everybody else that you're sitting beside. Make sure you have introduced yourself and made some new network friends. They can help with your career. Okay? But when you do go back, make sure that you stay involved with SQL Saturdays, with the local chapters, with the virtual chapters to continue your learning. We're going to go. And why aren't you? Excellent. There we go. Make sure you fill out your evals. It helps me as a speaker as well as all of the other speakers so that we can improve and give better sessions for you. If you think that my session is good, as I said, my name's Warwick Rudd. If you think my session was bad, my name's Chris Yates. He's standing at the back, so he won't be offended. So let's get in and have a look at Azure Data Studio. Now, what are we going to cover today? I'm going to introduce you to the history of ADS. I'm then going to run you through the overview of what is ADS and how you can use it, when you should use it, and then demos. I'm literally going to be standing here for about 10 minutes talking to you. Session's over. So with that, because it's very demo heavy, can you please just keep your questions to the end so that we can make sure that we get through all of the demo content, and then I'm happy to answer all of your questions as you need. So let's take a step back in time. Back when I first started using SQL Server was only supported in an on-premises environment, so whether that be physical or virtual. The tooling that I had to be able to use that, first off, I had Enterprise Manager. It allowed me to, I see a few people nodding, so who's old enough like me that has played with, there you go. We then went from, we also had Query Analyzer where we could do our scripting. Okay, so we had to use two types of tools. That then changed with the release of SQL Server 2005, and we got Management Studio. But once again, with that, SQL Server was only available on a Windows environment. Okay, but what did it allow us to do? Well, we could look after our SQL Server environments. We could look after, as things progressed, we could then look after our Azure SQL databases and our Azure SQL data warehouses. It's a progression. We're having to constantly change. So with that, with the release of SQL Server 2017, the landscape changed again. We got SQL Server on another operating system. How do we manage that if Management Studio only runs on Windows? Who works in a, who works in an environment where you get to bring your own device? Okay. On that device, are you running a non-Windows platform? Yeah? How do you run Management Studio? No answers. Okay. Because it doesn't run on Windows. Sorry? Parallels. Okay. So because we got SQL Server on another operating system, we got Azure Data Studio. It wasn't actually known as Azure Data Studio. It was first known as SQL Ops Studio. Okay? And it was in preview. That was released on November 15, 2017. Okay, so we're just shy of 2 years with this tool. Over the next 9 months, we had 9 product releases. That led into, we then had a name change when we became generally available, and we've just gone over 12 months as generally available. This product has, just like Management Studio, a monthly release cycle where it's feature enhancements, bug fixes, new components to the tooling. And the beauty about it is you can be part of it, okay? Because one of the other things that we've got is there's an insider's version. So you can run both versions on your machine at the same time. What the insider's version allows you to do is you get to see things before it's actually made available. And you can give feedback back to the product team on what that feature is, whether it's buggy, etc. Okay? Be aware though, it is a preview, so it will have bugs. That's why they're wanting you to use it. So with that, we got Azure Data Studio. Like Management Studio, we can look after our SQL Server environments on our Windows platforms. Who in here is using Azure Data Studio? Okay, about 30% of the room. Who is not using Azure Data Studio because you think that it is just for Azure? A handful of people. That's good, okay? Because in a lot of the other sessions so far this week, a lot of people are not using this because they think it is only for Azure and that it is not for your on-premises environments. It doesn't matter. It just covers your SQL Server environments. But the beauty of it, as I said, we got 2017 and we could run it on Linux. So we can now use that. We've got it for Mac OS. You just go to the download site, choose which operating system you want, and it's the same experience across the board. Like Management Studio, we get to look after our SQL Server environments, we get to look after our Azure databases and our Azure data warehouses. Things have changed. We've got managed instances now, and we can look after those, but I purposely didn't include that into this particular slide. So when should we use Management Studio? Well, if I spend a lot of time doing DBA tasks, such as security, user management, or performance tuning, if we're importing or exporting DAC packs, or if we're managing HADR scenarios, okay? Why would we, these tasks that I've got up here, why would I say these are a good thing for us to use inside of Management Studio? Anybody? UI support. Correct, the UI support. So when should we use Azure Data Studio? Well, we should use it when we're performing DBA tasks, specifically around scripting. Now, nearly everything that I said on the previous side, we can do with scripting. So therefore, actually, we should use Azure Data Studio for when we want to do anything with scripting. And what I'll show you over the course of the next hour is we don't need to step outside of this one tool. So some of the other things you might want to do, if you're needing to create some quick visualizations, Azure Data Studio makes that nice and simple for you to be able to do, and we'll have a look at that in the demos. Notebooks. Who's heard of notebooks? A few people. Excellent. Connecting to big data clusters. And also if we're running PowerShell. Who's not using PowerShell for their SQL Server environments? A couple of people, okay. Well, the beauty of it is with Azure Data Studio, you'll be able to learn PowerShell a whole lot easier. So with that, I was pretty much on time, 10 minutes. Session's over, you know everything about Azure Data Studio there is to know. So let's have a look at the demo. Okay. So seeing as most of you have used Azure Data Studio, you'd be fully aware. But for those of you who aren't, when you come in and you start Azure Data Studio, this is pretty much the screen that you will see. Now, if you happen to have gone to Rob Sewell's session on Wednesday afternoon, Rob told everybody the main benefit of Azure Data Studio is you get pretty colors. Okay, so we can see here in my connections, we have some pretty colors. But also you'll notice that I'm running in the dark theme. I prefer the dark theme because it works well for my aging eyes, and in some presentations when it goes up on the screen, the default light screen, the attendees, you can't even see anything that's on there. But it's much, much easier for us to select the dark theme or any theme than it was in Management Studio, and it goes across the entire UI. We can just come down to the little cog here, and we've got color themes, and we've got a number of themes that are available to us. Okay, you can then choose which one you want to use. The other thing that I like about this from a presentation point of view is the scalability that I can use. That's probably a bit too small for everybody at the back, yes? But I can easily just make that a whole lot bigger, and the whole thing scales. Okay, so it works well for demonstrations, but it also works well for when I'm working on much smaller screens, okay, because I can make it a lot easier for myself to read. The couple of things that you want to know about and use for when you are managing your environment. So if we connect to our local server, the first thing that we want to do is we can do a manage, and we get a dashboard at that instance level. It gives us information about the instance that we're looking after. So quickly and easily, we can see here that I'm using Developer Edition, what the server name is, what the OS is, and we can see some up the top, we've got a couple of different tabs. Now, with that, we've got the same for our databases. So we can say manage. And it gives us information about our databases. For that database, we can see here's the objects. We can quickly search for those. And we're even able to have some quick help to pull out data from those particular tables. Now, one of the things that has been done to assist us, because people want what's in Management Studio into Azure Data Studio. It's not a complete replacement, but some of the most requested features have been added. So for example, we can have a look at properties, and it'll bring up the, there we go. It brings up the UI, which is what you're familiar with from Management Studio. Okay, so some things like that are ported across for you to make your life easier. Also, from within Management Studio, you can actually, say, launch into Azure Data Studio. Okay, so they are making them work together.
What about vice versa?
The question was, what about vice versa? Can we go launch from ADS into SSMS? I don't believe that we can at this point in time, but don't hold me to that one.
Okay.
So we mentioned that the majority of the time we're working in here because we're using scripting. So if we have a look at that. Okay. One of the things that I do like about Azure Data Studio is that it allows me to be a lazy DBA. I can do more with less. So for example, we've got T-SQL Snippets. And what do they allow us to do? Well, we'll get rid of that. So if I just start typing and I use SQL, we get a pop-up window which comes in, and these are some out-of-the-box snippets that Microsoft have created and included that you can easily do things that you don't have to remember. So we might want to create an index. So very easily, in a couple of keystrokes, I've now got what does a create index look like. I give it the table name, index name, the columns, etc. Job done. But it is very simple and easy for us to be able to create our own user snippets. And here's one I prepared earlier. But what we need to do is we go to the command palette, and the command palette is your friend. You know, I went to it with a shortcut key, Shift-Control-P. You can get to it via the cog down in the bottom left-hand corner, or you can go File and get to the command palette. But what we're wanting to look at here is configure user snippets. Now you'll see this gives you a raft of snippets of different language types that you can create. it's not just about SQL. So we can come down here, we create a SQL file. This is then going to create a JSON file that we want to put our code into. We'll just make that a little prettier. Now, bearing in mind this is a demo, so don't use select top star in your prod environment, but it depends on what you're doing. This is just a simple one to show you how this works. So we've given it a prefix. We give it the body of what it looks like. We then just have to save that JSON file. Now that saves into your profile. If we come back, we'll get rid of all of that. And there's our snippet. Change the database. And we then get our results. Okay? One of the good things that I do like about this also from a being lazy, who does a lot of work with changing stored procedures, creating functions, views, etc.? Yeah, quite a number of you. So if you're working in a stored procedure and you're needing to do a new join, add to a new table, how do you know what all of the columns are, or what's the easiest way to find what are all of the columns in that table, what are the data types, so that you can do the join in a most effective way and you're not getting implicit conversions or anything like that? What would be what someone would use? Anybody? Okay, so you can either go searching for that table, expand it, have a look, use SP help, etc. This is made nice and simple for you. It doesn't work in this screen at the moment, but we just go a new query window, paste in our query, we'll just connect. So once we're connected, change our database. So what we can do is I can right-click on the object. So in this case, it's a table. And we see here that I've got go-to definition and view definition. Go-to definition, it will go and create and script out that and put it into a new query window for you. But we can go peak definition, and it works that out and it places it into the query window that you are currently using. Therefore, you can see it. You don't have to step outside, change windows, copy and paste, and have fat fingers and make the wrong copy. You've got it right here in front of you, make your changes, and then you can exit out. And you can do that for tables, views. Functions, however, do not, where we are, this one. Functions only give us the schema name. So for a function, you'll have to dive into that yourself if you're wanting to know what is the contents of that function. Okay. So when we are querying data, one of the things that we are looking at doing, just like we do in Management Studio, okay, we may need to undertake some performance tuning. So, you know, we'd want to run Profiler, or we'd want to look at the execution plans that are associated with that statement that we're trying to use. Now, we just need to access that a little bit differently. For Profiler, once again, we have to go to our command palette, and if we just start typing Profiler, we can see here, launch Profiler. Now, I'll do that in a minute when I open up a new query window. Profiler is an extension, and I'll talk about extensions shortly. You need to install them, and this is the beauty of Azure Data Studio. You can configure it how you need it, okay? If you're a DBA, you're likely wanting to have a number of extensions to assist you for a DBA-type tasks. If you're a developer, you might not care about SQL Agent. You might not care about SQL Profiler, so you don't have to have those configured and installed. So let's just take this query. run our profiler. When we launch Profiler, it's got a couple of inbuilt templates that we can choose. We give it a name, and we say start. So just like we would expect to see inside of Management Studio, and we're currently running. If we come back and we run our, let's just make sure you're off. We run our statement. We come back to Profiler. Here's all of the information, just like you would normally have inside of Management Studio for you to do something. So we can see, okay, if we click here, let's just get rid of you. We can look at the details. There's the statement we ran. Here's the associated details with that statement that we've captured. So you're then able to dive in and have a look at that. Now, if we were to have a look at the execution plan, there's two ways of doing it. So you can see up where my mouse is in the middle here that we've got explain. Explain is actually a estimated execution plan. And so we can run that. It'll generate the execution plan. We can see here it's not too bad for a very simple statement. If we want to run and get the actual execution plan, then once again we go to command prompt or to the command palette and run the query with actual plan, and it'll go and create that actual plan. So with that, you're then able to dive in, have a look at what those details are for that operator in conjunction with Profiler, and you're able to do your job. Oh, I didn't show it just before, because we'll get to that. So if I just come back to the results. So with this tabular model, in the slides, I mentioned about quick visualizations. You may not have picked up, but if we come over here, oh, wrong one. So over to the side of our result sets, we've got these new options, and we can save our result sets nice and simply out to CSV, Excel, JSON, XML, and we can place things to a chart. So if we click on the chart, straight away it's gone and created that chart, and we haven't had to do anything. Okay, we've got some options. We can then choose what type of chart we want to place that in. Who's had to create management reports? Yeah, nearly everybody here. Now we all know a picture paints 1,000 words, right? So I've just been able to create that chart just with one click. Previously, I would have had to have run that, copied out the result set, placed it into Excel, be an Excel wizard, being able to create charts, copy that into my report, okay? Takes a long time. I can say copy image or save image, and with that copy image, I can just paste that straight into my report. So I'm being able to be more effective in giving management what they need. We can take that one step further. You can see just to the left of copy as the image is a create insight. Now, an insight is something that you can create and place onto a dashboard, whether that be a database dashboard or whether that be a instance level dashboard. So to create an insight, we will do a nice simple one. You need to have a file with a script that's what you're wanting to run. So we just do our connection. Nice and simple, but it's showing 2 active connections. If we go to our chart, we then go create insight, creates our JSON. We can give it a name of whatever we want to call that. And it tells us we're creating a bar chart, what its parameters are, and then this is the location of the file that is going to run. With that, just select all of that JSON code. We then want to go to our command prompt and go to settings. Look for dashboard. Okay, and we edit the JSON file. We just want to make sure that we come to the correct location, so we can see here dashboard database widgets. Put a comma, paste in our active connection, save that. We'll just close out. And then if we come back to our database dashboard, doesn't matter which one, we've now got our active connections insight. You can create anything that you want as long as you can script it and it's information that you need that helps you, particular to either the database or the instance. It's limitless on what you can do. I've just shown you how quickly and easily we are able to do that. Now, we spoke about and we've seen the visualizations. Just recently, that's taken even further steps forward. We're able to, if we come back to our next one, do our connection, we're able to use Sanddance. Now, Sanddance is an extension. Everything in Azure Data Studio is all about extensions so that you can make it your way. So if we run this query, okay, we get our tabular results where we're just seeing dog licenses sold by town. And I've just grouped this into, or limited it to 3 particular years so that you can see what they are. Now, before we just clicked on the chart, now we can go, let's visualize this in Sanddance. The beauty of this, it goes and creates, there's your visualization, but we're able to change that. What do we want to see? Okay. We can change it however we want. We can then filter, change so that you can dive down and analyze your data to find out what you need to report on. The other way you can do it, so we've just pulled that data straight from a table. If you've got a CSV file, we can come on that CSV file and say view in Sanddance, and it'll open up that CSV file and create our visualization straight inside of Azure Data Studio. Once again, we're able to change things, what we want to see, filter down, etc. Has anybody played with Sanddance? A handful of people, okay? But add this extension, have a look at your data, and it'll give you a good insight into what sort of data you are playing with. From an administration point of view, if you're a DBA, you're likely going to be doing a number of these tasks, okay? Backup restore, importing and exporting DAC packs, Schema Compare, scripting, working in T-SQL or PowerShell. Who's a junior or relatively new to being a DBA? Handful of people, okay. One of the big things with backup and restore is learning how or what backups I need when I'm going to do a restore. So here's a typical scenario, okay, where, can everybody read that at the back? No? You want it a bit bigger? Okay. Is that better? Okay. So we've got multiple backups that are in play. So we've done full backups, we've done differential backups, we've done multiple transaction log backups. So when we need to do a restore situation, finding out and getting the correct backups that we need to restore from and the correct order that we want to restore those from, it's not that simple a task to go and do. But if you're someone new, it's even more difficult. So what has been done, and this is quite a good feature, so we can come in here, right-click on our test backups, and we can see backup and restore wizards. If we click on restore, what this gives us the ability, and I'll just take it back down one. What this gives us the ability to do is, hang on. There we go. We can choose the database that we're restoring from. We can choose the destination, so we can go new. And you can see down the bottom here, it's selected 3 backups. So it's automatically gone and had a look at what we've got in play and what we need to use. We can script that out, and anytime. There we go. And so it's created our list of scripts that we want to run. We've told it to go new, so we've got our new database name, but it's also changed inside of all of our files, so we're doing the move, and it's given it those, so we don't have to worry about it. but it's a really good user experience on how you can learn how things are joined together, that you are getting the correct backups in the correct order to make your job easier. As I mentioned about extensions, there's a number of extensions that you can pick and choose. From an administration point of view, this is a list of extensions that I look at using and I recommend. The admin pack, we definitely need that. So if you're wanting to use SQL Agent, Profiler, Importer, DAC pack, etc., you need that extension. If you're a developer, then you probably don't care about those and you don't have to install them. The data virtualization is brand spanking new. It had a name change. We need that for our connectivity, specifically with big data clusters. We've got connectivity to Postgres. We can use PowerShell. For those that aren't using PowerShell, the beauty of it, when you install the PowerShell extension, so we can see over to the side here, we've now got an option. When we click on that, this will just take a couple of minutes to go and populate, but this gives you the full list of all of the available commandlets. So it makes it nice and simple for you to be able to learn and add those into your scripts. The Redgate search. Most people are using that anyway inside of Management Studio, and it's available inside of here to assist with your day-to-day activities. We've spoken about Sanddance. Plan Explorer. Who uses Plan Explorer to look at? Okay, quite a few of you. So we've got Plan Explorer inside of Azure Data Studio to make our life easier, and we'll have a look at that very shortly. Schema Compare. We can come back to a particular database, right-click, Schema Compare, choose our... So it's a bit hit and miss at the moment because this wasn't working. Then just before, and I was talking with Vicky, and I said it wasn't working, and when I showed it to Vicky, it worked. And now I'm here with you, and it's not working. And she's in a... It is. So, sorry, I can't show you that. But what you can do from there, you can then do your compare, generate the output, and it'll create it using SQL CMD. And the beauty of that, when we do have, oh, that's not the one that I want. If you do have a statement, so you've now got, if you've got a script that is using SQL CMD inside of your query window, you've got to enable the CMD, just like we do in Management Studio, where we go from the File menu. We have to do that here. But the SQL Compare will create the SQL CMD scripts for you to be able to use. Therefore, you can start that journey of putting things in source control, making sure that the environment that you're giving to your devs is what they need, or vice versa when it's coming to you. Same as with the input. Let's see if this comes up, because this wasn't coming up, and it's not going to come up. The demo gods are against me. All right. I didn't sacrifice the chicken, no. Now, so far we've just had a look at doing things inside or with T-SQL. But we can see here I've opened up a PowerShell script. It tells me it's recognizing that it's a PowerShell script. And if we go to our terminal, okay. And we can see I've just executed PowerShell straight from inside of the same tool. I don't have to jump out. So I don't need to use PowerShell ISE. Now I know you can use VS Code. Who's heard of or had a VS Code? A couple of people. Okay. ADS and VS Code are alike. ADS is a branch of VS Code. VS Code has a whole lot of other things in it that aren't specific to what us as data professionals use. but that's why it is very, very similar in its look and feel. But we can stay in here using our PowerShell. I mentioned Plan Explorer, so I'll just get rid of you. So if we have a really bad statement that generates a large execution plan, and you're not doing it. We'll try and get as much real estate as we can. And sorry, I'm going to make this small, just so that, okay, now you can't see the operators, but it gives you an idea as to the type of execution plan that this statement has run through. So at this level, even on my screen, everything is quite small. I can hover over it. None of you are going to be able to read that. Okay, but I'll just make it bigger so that we can actually go back and do this. So with Plan Explorer, we need to, it's an extension, we put it in place, and we're able to toggle it on and off. And so when we execute the statement, run the actual again. Oops. What it goes and does, it creates the execution plan like we just saw, but it also opens up another window for us that has the execution details in it. We click on View Plan, and here's our wonderful, right, so I'll just make it a lot smaller, but what we're used to seeing and using inside of Management Studio, we don't quite have the full functionality of Management Studio Plan Explorer as we do in ADS. It's a work in progress, it's a month-by-month thing, but it's a whole lot nicer and easier for us to use when we're performance tuning and identifying what's happening with the statements that we are running. Okay. So, working with containers. Does anybody work with containers at the moment? A handful of people? Okay. So once again, so far, it's all about showing you the journey that we don't have to step outside of Azure Data Studio. Now, before I start, I need to call out and a big thanks to Anthony Nocentino. I don't know if any of you went to his Kubernetes session on the day one, but Anthony helped me on my journey with using containers, and we got the basics and everything just for this. So I'm not an expert on containers in any way, shape, or form. But I also want to thank Rob Sewell. So like me, Rob does work with Azure Data Studio. His session on Wednesday was around notebooks, and specifically around the markup with notebooks. Now, you may have noticed that a lot of the demo today, I have been working inside of SQL Notebooks. And the beauty of SQL Notebooks is I can have text, I can have images, I can have GIFs, and I can have code, all in the one location. It also, when I execute the code, the results are stored in my notebook. Therefore, I can share my notebook with others. Be very careful when doing that, though. Okay, if your result set is large, then that actual data is stored in your notebook, and that file is going to be quite large. But also, depending on the data that you are retrieving, if that's any PII data, you've got to be careful with who you're sharing that notebook with. Okay? As a demo tool, it's fantastic because I can have this all in an order, make it nice and simple for you to follow along. So one of the things that you don't want to do, and I've had to do it, but you'll notice up the top right-hand side here, this thing called trusted. This particular notebook, I have made it trusted. That means that I can put things into here and click on links, and it will go and do things. Okay? Rob talks about that in his session, so if you want to know more, feel free to watch his session from the recordings. But we're able to, like that, create this link and easily open up the terminal window. So we've used PLSQL, we've used PowerShell. I'm now using Docker inside of Azure Data Studio. And so we can see, this will give us a list of, okay. So we can see I've got a container already in place running. If I want to know and get images or find out what images that I've currently got in place, running that, here we go, we can see that I've got 4 images already downloaded and in place on my laptop. So if we were wanting to pull the latest image, because 2019 was only released this week, go and pull the latest image. Beauty of this is I did this yesterday, so I don't actually have to do the download, and it'll just say, hey, it's already there, we don't have any work for us to do. So if we're wanting to create a new container, easily enough, we give it our connection details, we give it our name, the port, etc., that we're wanting to connect to. We run that. Then we want to have a look at, so it's created. How quick was that? We just created an instance of SQL Server, and that's running. We can't do that on Windows. So, yet. Okay, so we now have a look, and this will show us that I've got two instances, or both containers up and running. We can see the one that started 19 seconds ago. I don't have to run the Docker start because I already had it running. But we're able to stop our container when we're finished. And we can remove that container. So that makes it nice and simple for us to be able to spin up and create environments for our devs very quickly with very little resources. So with that, we've still got our container running, and just making sure that we are connected to the right one. There we go. And we'll just zoom in. So we can see there that running dev on an Ubuntu Linux server inside of a couple of seconds, we've then been able to query that. And if we wanted to, we're just going to create a table, insert some data, and then drop that table. So very quickly, we've been able to connect through to another environment. And this is why we're just trying to get that message across. It's not just for Azure. So we've connected to local instances. We've connected to containers so far. Next up, Azure SQL Database. Nice and simple. Just like we did for our container. There we go, ADS demo. We're able to connect to our Azure SQL Database. We can do exactly the same thing for our, where are we down here? Postgres. We change our connection. Take a little bit of time, and there we go. So it's not just about SQL Server. We've evolved, okay? MySQL, we will get that very shortly. It was hoped to have been ready, but it's not quite. It's public knowledge. We are getting that. So once again, we're able to do our entire suite inside of one tool. Big data clusters. You would have seen these in the keynote. So I need to big thank you and call out to Ben Weissman. So Ben did a session on Wednesday afternoon on big data clusters. I'm not here to talk about big data clusters, but he's letting me use his big data cluster to show you guys the connectivity that can come about from this. So when you do create a big data cluster, one of the benefits you get from that is, you can see over the side here, I don't have it because I haven't created it, but under the Jupyter books. This gets populated with a raft of notebooks, which are all of the things you need to do to manage and maintain and troubleshoot your big data cluster. The change in experience, so I just stepped through the creation of a container using Docker. If we come back here for a minute, we've now got a new experience which has come out, so deploy SQL Server. When we click on that, we can choose from here what do we want to deploy to. So we can say deploy to SQL Server on Windows, and this will go and create the runbooks for us to be able to do that installation. We can do the same for our container, and we can choose what version we want to do. So if I go 2019 and we go select, must give it a secure password. We all use password, don't we? And give it the port that you're wanting to connect to. We open the notebook. This is then going and created everything for you to be able to step through. It's a little bit more of a boast than what I did just before with taking you through, because I've done it very specific on what I'm wanting. But this is more parameterized, and as you can see, we can create that and you can execute this statement. Inside of the notebook, we can run all of the cells at once, or we can run each individual cell each time. Depending on the statements that are run, if you run all cells, the time it will take to complete could be a little long. So it's the same with big data clusters. You go through, put in a lot more information, it creates those runbooks, it then goes off and creates the big data cluster. When we are connected to our big data cluster, one of the beauties of it, so just a little bit more real estate. So we've got our normal databases that we're used to connecting to and managing and maintaining, but we've also got HDFS. And we can see here we've got a number of files or folders with a number of files, etc., that are located underneath. So when we connect to our big data cluster, and we just make sure, so we're connected to ADS, go. Okay. We run that connection. And so we can see this is running 2019, it's Dev Edition, and it's running Ubuntu, okay, for the big data cluster. If we go and this statement here is just going and reading from the CSV files on HDFS. So we're not even hitting the database. We get our result sets, and we haven't had to shift any data. We've not done any ETL to move that data around from A to B, load it into our database. We're just reading straight off those files. We can then combine those with if we've created a polybase external table, we can then combine what our statement looks like, and we can get more information. So this is one of the good things about big data clusters, but I'm not here to talk about those. It's just showing you that we're able to connect to them and manage them from inside of ADS. I'm not saying that you can't connect to a big data cluster from Management Studio. It is just a SQL connection, but you won't get the notebooks because they're specific to ADS, not inside Management Studio. How are we going? Okay. Now, PowerShell. Who's using DBA tools? Okay. So the beauty of it is we're able to use those tools, as long as we've got them installed, we can use those inside of our environment. Okay. So we can see here, I can get the config. We'll just bring up. Go and get our config. Anytime now. There we go. So we've got our list of configurations with DBA tools that we may want to go and configure. we can then come down and, a bit far, we might want to know, have we configured the server name that we're wanting to run our DBA tools against? We can see that it's already configured, but it might be wrong, and we might want to change that. And we can configure the server name, plus also configure the instance name that we're wanting to run changes against. Very simply able to do that. We haven't stepped out. Then there's certain checks that you may want to exclude that you're doing. And there's multiple ways of doing that. You can either use the explicit exclude option, or you can set it as a parameter, and then you run the invoke check. When we do run the checks inside here, because it is using Pester, there we go, we'll just come up a little bit further. It takes a little bit of time, but the beauty of it is that just like in VS Code or PowerShell ISE, you get the same results. There we go, we've got some red. So we know we've got some things that we need to go and check and look at in my environment. It's not all 100% healthy, but we've got here, so we failed 5 and we skipped 1. It's good information for us. But you can take that even further, and who's seen or heard that DBA tools have created a Power BI dashboard? A few people, okay. So we can kick this off. It'll take a little bit of time. It'll run through the tests, and the last command that it's running is to start the Power BI desktop, okay. So you must have that installed locally wherever you're running this from, but it will capture the information that it's collecting from those DBA checks, and we're then able to pass them through and see the results inside of the Power BI dashboard. Not too much longer, and it'll bring that up. Yes. Now, one of the things that I was wanting to show while this is just finishing off, one of the new things that has come out this week, because we got the new version of ADS shipped on Monday. I've gone against my own good judgment, but hey, I've installed the latest release. As you saw with the Schema Compare, it's a little bit up and down, but one of the new features that has come about is PowerShell notebooks. So everything that we've spoken about or seen so far has been a SQL notebook. Okay, so it's just using the T-SQL code inside of those, but we can now create PowerShell notebooks. So you can take your DBA checks and place them into a notebook. And what would that look like? So I'll just open that. So like we saw with all of our other notebooks, we give it that information that we are wanting. As I say, I've got in here, how do we go about setting this up and configuring it? Okay, so we want to install the module, and here comes our report. Come on, you can do it. So they've created this report. So when you download and open it for the first time, it will always look like this. All you need to be able to do is you come in and you do a data refresh, okay? Because it'll then pick up what you've just populated with running the DB check and passing that through. But you're able to see what are your environments that you have run your DBA check against, where are you sitting? So as we saw when it was running through, we had some errors. We expect that, but it shows us here the errors that we have got. We can then filter down, go and have a look at just those errors to decide what we want to work on. So we've got that information inside of the PowerShell notebook telling you how you are able to install this, set this up, what you need to download and install. You don't have to follow the way that I've done this, but you can, here's your config. Those results would then be stored in the PowerShell, and you're able to share that with your other team members. And it gives us the same results. I'm not going to run through those because we've just seen the PowerShell running in the terminal window and just with the timing it takes to do those. Last but not least, so we're nearly there, source control. Who's using source control, or should I say who's not using source control? Okay, if you're not using source control, this is a great way for you to dip your toes into using that, because out of the box, Azure Data Studio gives you support for source control. Okay, so what we're able to do, create our local repository, initialize that with some Git commands, okay? We're then able to open that folder. Once we've opened that folder, ADS will go, I've got a repository, and we can come to our little source control section here, and we can see I've got some files sitting in my local repository that need some form of action undertaken on those. Until you've initialized that repository and opened it, ADS will not pick up that you have the source control available. So what are some of the meanings? So U means uncommitted. A, it's staged. M, it's a modified change. That's just information for you to help you on your journey when you are starting to undertake that and place things into your local repository. Question?
Will it hold your public and private key within ADS?
So the question was, will it hold your public and private key inside of ADS? I haven't looked into that because I've literally just done this with a local Git repository on my laptop, and I haven't pushed it to a remote repository as yet, but that's the type of idea that you would want to look at doing, whether you have a GitHub account and you're pushing that as your remote repository that your other team members can access and pull from so that you can all work collaboratively. So some of the basic commands that you'd want to look at using. So we want to, and we can do this straight from I need to go to the repository. Which is ADS demo. So I can run my Git commands straight from Azure Data Studio. So you can see there that my backup DB has changed from an uncommitted to a staged change. I can then commit that, give it our commands, and because I've committed it, it disappears from our list of changes that are sitting here waiting. Okay? If we wanted to have a look at what we've undertaken, we can have a look at the Git log, and we can see that today at, yes, it's very early, it's 4:30 a.m. my time. So, but we can see that I've committed those changes, and my team members are able to then, we can push that from my local off to a remote. You can then get access to that, pull those changes down, and we're all working on the same thing. So with that, let's go back to the slides. How are we doing? 10 minutes. So some resources, I've got 2 pages of resources here. This is what I've used to get to where I am. Okay, so all of these slides are up and available for you on the PASS website, so you can download those and work through all of that. Second lot of resources. And so what have we covered off? So we went through the history of ADS. Where did it come from? So we started at SQL Ops Studio, moved to Azure Data Studio. What have we? Why would we use it? Okay, we can stay inside of a single ISE to do all of the work that we need to do to manage and maintain our SQL Server estate. And then in the demos, the type of things that we looked at. So we showed you the dashboards, how we can be a lazy DBA by utilizing snippets, creating your own snippets, therefore you can be more efficient. The code definitions, being able to view or go to the definitions to make it easier for you to modify your code, being more efficient. With the environment support, so we went through being able to connect to a local instance, a Docker container, an Azure SQL database, a PostgreSQL database, and a big data cluster. Okay, we know that MySQL's coming, but that's your estate that you're now looking after. It's no longer going to be just SQL Server. Okay, you're going to look after more, and we're able to do it inside of a single tool. Extensions. In the marketplace, there is a number of extensions out there. You can just pick and choose what extensions you want to use. They'll make your life easier. You can even, if you want to, you can go down the path of creating your own extensions. Okay, so I think it was already, so Drew did a one on building your own extension here at Summit. So if that's of interest to you, make sure you watch that session. There you go, session at 2 o'clock this afternoon if you're interested in how to create your own extensions for Azure Data Studio. Question? Sorry? Are they all free? Extensions. So the question was, are the extensions free? To date, as far as I'm aware, every extension is free for you to download. Question? Okay, so the question was, how compatible are the extensions in VS Code, seeing as that VS Code has quite a number of extensions? How compatible are they inside of Azure Data Studio? I can't answer for all of those because I haven't played with all of the extensions that are available in VS Code, but I do know that there are people who have taken VS Code extensions because they were used to using VS Code. And they've now moved over from VS Code to ADS, and they've just, because they already had those extensions, they brought those, they've installed them, and they are using them inside of ADS. So there may be some slight hiccups depending on the type of extension, but I can't answer to all of those. SQL notebooks, we went through those. They're very easy for you to create different things, store that information with the text, images, and code, plus the results. With the new Powershell notebooks, same thing, it just makes your life easier. Okay, question?
So I do a lot of migrations. Can you do a backup on one system here and move the file into another server?
So the question was, can you take a backup on one server, move the file to another server, and do a restore? There's no reason why not. Okay, Azure Data Studio is just a tool for you to be able to connect to an environment. Okay, so when you run that backup command, you're telling it where are you placing that file. When you're doing a restore, you're telling it where you're coming from and where you're restoring it to. Question? So the question was, can you connect to a central management server? There is an extension, central management server. So if you install that, you then get the same functionality as what you would get inside of Management Studio. Question?
Is there a way to work with the SQL DB project or SSDT project in the Azure Data Studio?
So the question was, is there the ability to work with a SSDT project or a Visual Studio project inside of ADS? To date, I don't believe that there is that ability, but I'm not 100% sure because I haven't played with that functionality.
On the Schema Compare, does it do all the different Schema Compare that you can do within Visual Studio? For example, compare a live schema on a database to a Visual Studio project to a DACPAC, a schema that's within a DACPAC file, and interchange and see what differences there are?
Okay, so the question was, with Schema Compare, does it work and function the same as it does in SSDT with being able to compare database to database, database to schema, DACPAC to DACPAC, etc.? Yes, it does do those. You can even open, if you've created an SCMP file inside of SSDT or Visual Studio, you can open that SCMP file inside of ADS. Okay. The thing that you have to be careful of at the moment, and I have been caught out with that, is that with your Schema Compares, it needs to be via integrated authentication only. Okay, so if you've inside of Visual Studio, you could connect to an instance and use SQL authentication. Okay, when you try and reopen that, it doesn't store the credentials for that, so therefore you can't reopen that one because it can't connect because it doesn't have those credentials. Okay, so right at the moment it is only via Windows Auth.
Yeah, you show some formatting code in your demo about the coding style. Or something in the application.
Sorry, say that again.
The coding style. If you wanted to have like a centralized coding style for all your developers, what options do you have in
So the question was, can you have a central location for a particular coding style that you want? So you're wanting to create, here's a format that you want your developers to follow, and can you store that? Potentially, so you would potentially create a workspace. That workspace may be in a centralized location that the developers come to, right? Otherwise, you would have to share that. Okay, so, or you could do policy-based management, not inside of ADS, but from within inside Management Studio, you could set up policies that it needs to be in this way. Okay. Unfortunately, it's a tool that you can use, but putting it that as a enforcing shared, I don't think it's at that level yet. Okay.
On the download page, there's a user version and a system version. When would you use the system version? I'm not seeing much information on that.
Okay, so the question was, on the download page, you've got two types of installation that you can do. You can do a user installation or a system installation. So predominantly, you would use the user installation, and that's putting it specifically under your user profile. You can use the system installation, and therefore it's putting it for any user who is using on that machine.
Okay.
So, does it support analysis services connections at all?
So the question was, does ADS support analysis services at all? At this point in time, no. There are requests for that, and this is the beauty of it, right? So you can go to the ADS GitHub, raise a issue or a request, or have a look, just like you can with SQL Server features. Okay, so the ADS team, you can have a request or look, does it have these features? And based on the voting, on how popular it is, it then determines the order that things get put in to be worked on. So I do know that there is one right now for like DAX support. All right, so while the initial request was talking about, I want everything, but if we could get DAX support, that's what they'd be happy with. Question?
Can we run the query against multiple connections?
Sorry, can we run?
Query against multiple connections.
Okay, so the question was, can we run the query against multiple connections, like you would in Management Studio if you were using a central management server? So I haven't played with that yet, but if you've installed the CMS extension, I would expect that you would be able to. Question?
Probably because I haven't used both tools enough, but when do you truly use ADS over Visual Studio Code? Because they seem so similar.
So the question was, with VS Code and ADS being so similar, when would you use VS Code over ADS? I couldn't really answer that for you because I've never played with VS Code. I've ever only played with SQL Ops Studio and ADS. Okay, but I guess the main thing for you would be VS Code has a lot more language details in it. So if you don't need any of that, then you can just use ADS because it is more specific to us as data professionals. Okay? Any other question?
With regards to the Jupyter notebooks, so if you're using a Jupyter notebook for either training or user testing, what is best to install on a user's machine, like someone within the organization who's not in IT, so they can run through like user testing steps using the notebooks, so that we're not having to sit right next to them and instruct them and see what the results are. What's the best user story for that scenario?
Okay, so the question was for testing or user training, and if we've created a notebook which has a list of tasks that they want to do, it may have some images, some GIFs, here are all of the steps. What's the best user experience to undertake that so that you don't have to sit with them? Okay, so the easy thing from that is they can just install ADS. Okay, it's a free download, and they're just opening up the notebook. And if they are running against an instance, so you're wanting to do some training, then as long as they have access to that training, it's just a connection and they're going step by step through that.
Okay. I didn't know if there was anything special or this was too much or something even lighter weight for you as a reader or something.
Yeah, I guess, well, the beauty of it is, okay, they can just install ADS, right? They don't have to go and install all of the other extensions. As long as you've got the virtualization, right? So therefore you can get which gives you the 2019 feature set, okay? Which is where notebooks, that feature set is in that particular code. Doesn't mean that you have to connect to a 2019 instance, okay? So you can connect to any supported instance of SQL Server. It is just a connection. So with that, it can be very lightweight that they're not even having to do anything other than that, and then they can just open the notebook. No problems. Any other questions? Well, with that, I think we've done quite well time-wise. Thank you for your time. Thank you for attending my session. Enjoy the rest of the summit.